Today we're going to be discussing difficulty of the target. That could mean a few different things. Size of the target as well as distance. This is going to be piggybacking off our last video where we diagnosed your grip. If you guys haven't seen that video, I encourage you to check up above. For today's video, we're going to be discussing based on the size of the target and the distance of the target. That's going to change ultimately our strategies for pulling the trigger, as well as how fast we're going to be shooting in between shots, referred to as splits. So with that, let's get into today's video.
Ending it with a pistol shot.
Yeah. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Josh Nelson with Force Frontier Training Group, and behind me is our Force Frontier Skill Builder target that can be found at axletargets.com, axletargets.com. If you guys are looking to improve your skills, I encourage you to check out our course catalog. For our YouTube content, we put out educational and entertaining content. So if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit subscribe. To demonstrate the difficulty of the targets, I'm going to be working all of these from 7 yards, but the beauty of our targets is you have a lot of different options on there. So we have the 1.5 inch circles, we have the full A-zone targets, 75% A-zone targets, 2x6, as well as the 2.5x6 rectangles. Depending on which target I'm looking at is going to change ultimately my strategy for dealing with it. The strategies I'm referring to are going to be the way I'm pulling the trigger, as well as visually what I'm seeing, in this case, the dot doing within that section of the target. So if I'm working at the A zone at 7 yards and I'm just getting a violent streak of flash, as long as that flash of red is inside the target area, I'm safe to pull the trigger. But if I were to implement that same strategy on the 1.5 inch circles, I'm gonna run into some major problems. So let's start fast to slow and demonstrate ultimately what I'm looking to do visually, as well as what I'm looking to do with my grip and pulling the trigger. All right, so for just shooting a bill drill at 7 yards, 212, pretty accountable for those hits. They're all within the zone. 107 first shot, and then I had a 2-2, 2-2, 2-1, 1-9, 2-1. I could certainly shoot that faster and I could certainly shoot it slower, but I felt comfortable I was gonna be accountable for all of those hits within that big A-zone target, upper thoracic, center mass shot. If I were to do that same thing again on a smaller target, may not have the same effect. I'm seeing a violent streak of red, I'm staring at the A of the A zone, and I'm accountable for all those shots because I know that the dot is returning ultimately somewhere within that streak, which is within that target area that I'm focused on. If I have a good established grip, which we talked about in the last video, then this really shouldn't be a problem for me. Now I'm gonna move on over to the 75% A zones, the J in this case, and see how the times are compared. Obviously, I'm taking into account that I'm drawing out of the holster and everything, just to give you a full picture of what I'm looking to do. Now, I shot that at relatively the same, actually a little bit faster as far as splits go. My first shot was a 1-2-2, so it took a little bit more confirmation on there. Again, could shoot it faster, could shoot it slower. This is all just shooting it cold. And I had 1-9, 2-0, 2-1, 2-1, 2-2 splits, similar splits, and we see what happened is I actually threw one of the rounds just off to the right. Grip breaks down, and we start running into problems. So visually, I'm just kind of committed to shooting that target, and then our grip breaks down and we throw one round, bring it back to center, and then we go from there. So I'm gonna have to be a little bit more accountable for a smaller target. So getting every single round within this zone, I'm gonna shoot this again and see how we do. Usually slower as it gets smaller. Because visually what I'm seeing is, I'm staying accountable for those hits, but it's gotta be within that streak, and for that to happen, I kinda gotta slow down my splits versus it just being a big long streak, pulling the trigger as fast as I can. So let's try that again. 75% A zone, I'd like to be 100% accountable. Let's see what I can do comfortably to make sure all those rounds hit. Good, all right. So obviously we shot it quite a bit slower, 2.55 overall, 1.30 first shot. and then we had a 2.6, 2.6, 2.4, 2.5, 2.4. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but we're, hundreds of seconds can change the difference in ultimately your accuracy on a target. I was accountable for all those hits, so we were able to visually verify that that dot is in that zone, even though it's doing this and it's a streak, and I'm able to stay accountable for those hits. Rolling the trigger to the rear on both of these, meaning I'm just continuously pulling to the rear, coming off the trigger, pulling to the rear, pulling to the rear, pulling to the rear, and I'm repeating that process. Now let's move to a smaller target. This is gonna be a 2.5 by 6 rectangle, and let's see how those splits change. Let's see how ultimately I'm not necessarily rolling anymore. I'm kind of prepping slightly, pulling through, prepping slightly, pulling through, prepping slightly, pulling through. 2.5 by 6, the W in this case, on the target. We'll just do the same drill, 6 rounds. We'll just keep everything consistent here. All right, you guys notice that obviously things slow down quite a bit. 1.34 first shot, 3.60 overall. I had a 4.7, 4.6, 4.3, 4.6, 4.4. I want to be clear about something. Cadence can help you with your trigger freeze, just reminding you to come off the trigger, but cadence isn't going to ultimately help me like getting a rhythm in my head, help me fire rounds repeatedly and get those 4-4 splits, or if I'm getting a 2-0 split. It's visually what I'm seeing, and then I'm just repeating the process. And as long as I'm repeating it and everything's consistent with my grip, my splits should be relatively similar. Now I was accountable for all those hits, so now let's move on to the 2x4 head box, same drill. So let's go to the head box now and see how things change. I gotta make sure that thing kind of settles because of the verticality of it. I got leeway right and left, but if I'm focusing on my grip, I want the dot to come back. 12 to 6, 12 to 6, 12 to 6 on that A. All right. Bad grip. So I had a bad grip to start, and then I was kind of stuck with that bad grip. So I had, you guys notice inconsistencies with those splits. 1.61 first shot, 5.2, 5.6, 7.3, 5.1, 5.2. So we had a little bit of an issue grip coming out of the holster, and as a result, I dipped a couple shots low on 3 and 6. So let's clean this up a little bit. Should have enough to shoot one more in the head box. Good. Couple barely low. 5.7, 5.7, 5.1, 5.9, and then I slowed down on the end because visually I was starting to lose the dot, like making sure it was settling in, because a couple of those went just below the head box. So again, you're gonna have to really control that trigger finger, making sure that we're hitting those rounds. Now, depending on the target and ultimately what you're trying to accomplish with that is gonna dictate how fast you shoot. It is deceiving shooting at the head box of a silhouette and you're feeling okay about it hitting a little low. But if we focus on just the shape, ultimately what we're trying to shoot, we got to really make sure that we're visually confirming the dot is settling, 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 and that we're not putting input into the gun that's going to negatively affect our shots. Last one, let's shoot the 1.5 inch circle. And just for reference, I'm going to shoot the left side of the target, bottom right circle, just so we're clear on where my shots are going. Same drill, we'll do 6 rounds. I'm going to have to really be accountable for my grip, really accountable for my trigger press, and visually lock in on that circle. Disconnected with the grip slightly there. I got just enough to shoot it again. So I had all right around the circle, and then I had one low left that's gonna be right hand influence. So I'm gonna shoot the one to the left of that and see where we're at. Really focus on grip, isolate that trigger finger. For reference, that was 8.0, 7.8, 8.4, 8.1, and a 9.2 split. So again, we started losing it towards the end there, making sure our grip stays locked in throughout this entire process. One more time. And we're out. Let's walk up to the target and see what we got. So to break this down, we shot that bill drill to start, accountable for all those shots. Something I practice quite often, you know, bill drill 7 to 10 yards, making sure I'm within that upper thoracic. Feel very comfortable there, but you guys notice as we back up, good here on the W, fairly good on this J. Shot it twice, but we had one flyer. Again, got to make sure that we're walking ourselves through that process. So to help myself for future content, I'm going to walk myself through the process, deliver it to the holster, bring the gun up into view, leveling it out, getting a good established grip, flagging that left thumb, and then bang, 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 and not dipping. So anytime you see this stuff low, a lot of times that's gonna be just simply your dominant hand having too much input into the gun. So we shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on that first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right around that circle, but I wasn't fully locked in on that grip, accountable for all those shots. And then again, same issue. It's kind of deceiving, right? I want to make sure all these are in the box, and it's very doable at that distance. The problem becomes that first couple shots, it's no problem, and then we're not, you know, anchoring that grip and things start to fall off. So as we increase the difficulty of the shot based on the size of the target or the distance to the target, that's going to influence how we press the trigger, how we visually see that dot behavior. Violent flash, you know, somewhat of a flash within this J, somewhat of a flash here, but it's got to be somewhere in here. And then here we got to let that dot settle. Here we got to let that dot settle. There's not a lot of wiggle room there. So if you guys found this information useful, make sure you give us a like. If you guys are going to go out and practice some of these drills on your own, I encourage you to pick up some of our targets at axletargets.com. Link in the description below. And with that, guys, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.